6 o'clock, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
DeSouza.
Here.
Murphy.
Here.
McCanny. Perkins.
Here.
Turpinning.
Here.
Cuxy.
Here.
Cullis.
Here. I would make a motion to excuse Mr. McCanny. He is at 6th grade camp.
Wow.
Is there
I second.
support?
I second.
Motion by Cullis, support by Turpinning. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and we passed. Now, the agenda approval. Before, I would like to amend the agenda under new business to put as number 4, consideration for infill construction in the historic district. Thank you.
I'm supposed to keep one, right?
Yes. Did you keep one? Okay. I would make a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Is there support? Support by Murphy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from March of 2023. Are there any additions or deletions? None appearing. The chair would entertain a motion.
Make the motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Support.
Motion by Perkins. Support by Cuxy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Statement of purpose. The mission of the Holly Historic District Commission is to safeguard the heritage of the village of Holly by preserving the historic district in the village that reflects the elements of the village's history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, or culture. The goal of the Commission's work is to stabilize and improve property values in the historic districts and the surrounding areas, foster civic beauty, strengthen the local economy, and promote the use of the historic districts for the education, pleasure, and welfare of the citizens of Holly. We don't have a presentation tonight. Ron Campbell's not with us, but I do have the draft that I will pass out under new business, and we can discuss that. We will move on to public comment. We have nobody in our audience for public comment. Those of you that may watch this on film, you have a right to public comment, but you have to be here to do that. And we'd love to see you in the audience sometime. From public comment, we will move on. There is nothing in old business, so we'll go right to new business, redistricting. Mr. McGee.
Yes. Here.
Here. Did you bring those maps?
Just the ones in your packet.
Who chose the panel?
Oh, I did.
Got it?
The panel was a group of those that volunteered.
I did.
We put out a request for volunteers to work on it. I think there was Sue Less, Denise Davidson, Linda Smith might have been part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Nicole.
Is there a list of who it is?
There's a list, but it says Ron Campbell, Shannon Cole, Diana Davis Clark, Suzanne Day, Les, Chris
Yeah.
Rickman, and Linda Smith.
Oh, okay. Where did you see that?
Chris Rankin is that in.
I thought Nicole was on there too.
Oh, way in the back. Yeah, okay. I was going down the list. It's been a while. There's no, it's 2016.
Did they have a particular criteria to follow?
Yes, based on, the criteria came from the SHIP office, and they did this. Steve, do you know whatever happened to the maps that were on the large boards?
I do not.
We had a couple of maps that have been produced and put on like film
Just for
core.
this, yeah. I will make a note and come up with some.
Because we did the infamous bus tour,
Twice.
yeah, and we made some, I don't know if I want to say corrections, but we made some decisions to include a couple that weren't included and to exclude some that was included.
As I read through it, I didn't see an opt-out.
Well, there isn't an opt-out. And one of the reasons, I don't know how many of you, was anybody on the board back then when this started? Okay, so let me give you a little update.
Yeah, I was village president.
Pardon?
I was village president at the time.
But you weren't
I
here.
wasn't on, I was on
Okay,
DA.
so this actually started when Jeff Miller was president,
Mhm.
the second time, after Pete. So this started, I got on the HDC shortly after I moved to town, probably back in 10 or 11. And at the time, we started working on the HDC, and it came up that some people had opted out and others hadn't. So I started looking into that, and I met with Ellen Thackeray and, what was the other lady's name? She has since moved on. Anyway, from the SHPA office. And I talked to them, and I had some concern, so I came back, and I met with Jerry and Jeff Miller at the time. And from that meeting, I encouraged them to have a meeting with the SHPA office in Lansing, and we drove to Lansing with Jeff, Joe Mishler, because he was here when the historic district started. So there was Jeff Miller, Joe Mishler, myself, and Jerry, and Ardith Reagan joined us in that meeting via the telephone, because Ardith was the one that started the ball rolling on the historic district to begin with. And at the time, and I had had an opportunity to talk to Ardith, they went through and got the areas where they had the most enthusiasm for a historic district, and that's how the districts were formed. And if I'm not mistaken, they formed 3 of them. They were in 3 phases. And somewhere you'll see the list where the historic district has like 3 lists. And of course, one of those includes the downtown area. The problem was the way it was formed didn't meet the criteria at the state level, because opting out when you create a district isn't part of that. It either qualifies as a historic district or it doesn't. And there were conversations about, for example, on Maple Street, if you think about the homes on the north side of the street, my side of the street, down by Mike McCanny, there's a red brick ranch in the middle.
Yeah, the old house burned.
The old house burned, and the new people at the time, because it wasn't a historic district,
Just 3 houses down from you, that house burned and was rebuilt.
no,
Yeah, coming
toward the
town.
school.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
but I'm talking about down by McCanny.
Oh, yeah.
So without a historic district, that house was allowed to be built. If you had had a historic district at the
Couldn't
time
have
of
done
that, well, you could still rebuild a house, but as you're gonna learn tonight by going through this draft, there are some parameters to keep it so that it at least mixes in with the historic district that's part of it. This draft I had asked Ron to put together because this commission is going to have to deal with the new building that comes into Battle Alley where the arcade was. The hotel and Andy's place, the facades are gonna stay pretty much the same because those portions were saved. In the case of the arcade, that's a whole new property. How do we deal with that? This board's never done that. So Ron had been working on this presentation, and he sent this to myself and Jerry Walker this afternoon. It is a draft. He's asking for us to look at it. Do we come up with any questions from it? What information, feedback can we give him so that he can finalize it and put it together? So that I wanted this commission to be ready before they come to the commission, and we're not sitting here going, well, what are the rules? What do we got to do? How do we do this? Because this is something we've never dealt with before. And based on the Interior, Secretary of the Interior and the Michigan SHPA, there are guidelines, and you'll see them tonight that are in here. That being said, I wanted to get back to this historic district because from Jeff Miller, we've had umpteen presidents along the way, and this always seems to fall through the cracks. The last time we had to stall it, we were with Nicole Edwards, or now it's Nicole, is it Edwards Rankin or just Rankin? It's both.
It's Edward
Oh,
Rankin.
Edwards
I don't
Rankin.
want to misrepresent somebody. So Nicole Edwards Rankin had been working on this, and she was also working in conjunction with, I think it's called the CLG. And she did a roadblock from a couple of things that needed. Nick Klemp has now taken that project over to get the final papers that are needed. I met with somebody at the state level when I was at the convention, and they were able to reach out to Nick's office to get the finalized papers so we can get that across the line, because there's grant money available once we qualify. And there's so much money available that originally when they had set it up, they were asking for matching funds. Well, the grant requests they had last year, they just gave it to everybody without matching funds because they had more money than requests. Well, I want to change that, or at least get on that gravy train, if you will. So I wanted to look at this and go over this. So the committee, if you look at the state law, has to be made up of nobody on this commission. Has to be a separate. So we put what would be the equivalent of an RFP. We put it out there. We asked for people that would be interested in helping do the work that needs to be done. I think, if I remember correctly, Sue Les was kind of in charge of this committee, and they went out and they had a criteria to look at houses, what qualifies, what doesn't, and when they came back, they had the areas that they felt were. Now, they had some questions, and then a couple people moved out of town, life keeps moving. We didn't have meetings for a long period of time because, for those of you that don't know, back in the day, those years, if we didn't have an application for the HDC, we didn't meet. Nancy Rebar at some point retired, stepped down. All of a sudden, I became the chair. And after a while of doing that, I think we went through, I could be wrong, Steve, like a 7-month period where we didn't meet.
Many times, yeah.
And it was really hard because nobody was fresh, nobody was familiar with, everybody was sitting here going, now what are we supposed to do? How do we do this? And I had said to Jerry, I said, we can't take that long of a break because it's too hard for the commission to deal with what they have. So we agreed that we wouldn't break as often as long as I would fill the agenda with presentations, educational issues, and so forth. So that's kind of what we've tried to do. That's why I wanted to bring this back out, so that as we work toward that CLG, we can get this fixed, so that we have defined boundaries for the historic district. Why did this come to the surface? If you look at our current historic district, you will notice that on one side of Washington Street we're historic, and on the other side we're not. And yet, when you go down the street, the houses on both sides would qualify. But because they only focused on those where they seemed to have a cooperative nature, that's how they ended up. But we do have more historic buildings within the village of Holly that would fall under this kind of condition. And as we move forward, we'll have people out here that'll talk when we get to the point where we're ready to make a presentation to the council. They'll explain the value of historic districts, how it improves the value of your homes, how it protects them. They'll be able to use examples like Maple Street where the red brick house came. Had you had a historic district there, they wouldn't have built a replica of what got burned, but they would have to build something more along the lines of what's already there. And it keeps your historic district looking more like what one would expect a historic district when they go to drive through. And they have a lot of those stats and statistics on the state level of how it works. But I wanted to bring this back before us to see where we are, to see what we need to do to get back on track. And the first thing that I see, Steve, is we need that information from those bus tours where we had decided we were going to keep some sections, add a couple of places to this.
Well, and the difficult part was too, we were taking as many off as we were adding. So it was really, even though they fell within the boundary as you see it here. And this is kind of the final boundary, once those three that you mentioned earlier were fused basically together.
It kind of changed a little bit,
A
the
little
boundary.
bit. And went down to the park a little bit, Waterworks, and it did some other things, and gerrymandering around a little bit, trying to catch as many, but when we went on the tour, there were as many that were in the district that needed to come out or be X'd out and didn't count because they've been remodeled over the last 100 years. But as George has brought up numerous times, kitty corner from him, there was a house that was done and just right. And it had, the big wide, aluminum on it, and they redid the house and they made it how it should have been and how it was.
Well, and now we have two of those because McCanny's did the same thing with their house.
Me too.
Back in the 50s and the 60s, these companies came along with this new invention called aluminum siding, and they sold it to everybody. You never have to paint your house again, you just cover it up. Well, they covered all of the architectural attributes. When the house kitty corner from mine came to us, they wanted to tear that old steel siding off, and they wanted to replace it with vinyl. Well, we don't want them to replace it with vinyl. The problem was, under the steel, in that process, they had destroyed much of the clapboard by pounding on these little aluminum foil sheets of insulation and all this parts. Well, we were able to, as Ron Campbell guided us through that, we were able to allow them to get the steel off, go back to the 4-inch, even though it's vinyl, but at the same time, we gained all the architectural attributes to the windows. And if you ever go by that house, it's on the corner of, what's behind your building? College in the front, Center?
Center.
It's on the corner of Center and Maple, kitty corner from me. If you look at the windows, they flare out, they have top boards again. All they were just little rectangles. Also, if you look up in the peak, the leaded glass windows are back out that were covered because they just threw the steel. Mike McCanny's house is a great example. The balloon bay windows were just boxed in and were gone. And all of that artwork that's on their house with the different fish scale sidings and the cedar shake and on the different, those were all gone. So on the house kitty corner for me, on the corner of Center, they also have a garage that's very tall because back in the day it was a carriage house and they would put hay up there. Well, that had been covered in the aluminum. When they pulled it off, we got the doors back, we got the windows back. I think we gained the windows on the side of the fireplace. And on the front porch, if you look at it now, I think there's 4 pillars, might be 6. In between the pillars, they crown. Well, back when they put the steel siding on, they put a 3rd board straightened out, everything just got slapped together. So there was an advantage to having an HDC to help guide that, help bring that project to where it is today. And as Steve said, it's a wonderful house to look at. Yes, it has vinyl siding, but gaining all the rest of it is a wonderful thing.
Well, and I think, back to your question to me initially, I don't think, I don't know if we have that paperwork, and more than that, it's been years. And so there's gonna be, even in those last 4 or 5, how many ever years it's been since we did the last tour, that might be a good thing to start, and I hate to do it a 3rd time.
Well, I'm
but I think
hoping we
need
at
to.
least have those big maps because that's
Oh,
where
have
we
the big-
drew.
I'm sure we have the big maps,
And,
but.
I mean,
think
they were
we
on
should-
phone core. I can't imagine somebody just pitched them.
No, I'm sure they didn't. But I think we need to have another tour and take the bus out like we did and have, like we had before, a specialist say, this has some of the attributes, but it doesn't count. Or this one is not in the district and it should be. So I know we don't want to do spot zoning or.
Right,
whatever.
and at the time, we were gonna have SHPA, well, and I think, the other problem that stalled us was COVID hit
Right.
and knocked us out. But we were gonna have somebody like Ellen Thackeray or one of those gals was gonna come out and sit down with us and then help us fine tune this thing as we put it together, because eventually we'll have to go back to the council and say, this is what we're recommending for a historic district.
Well, that was my question, George, one of my questions. Is there a general time frame in your mind as to when that will happen, or is it still up in the air?
Well, I would think that, because we're almost starting over,
Yeah.
but I would think it would take us perhaps a year.
I would think.
It just seems like we're closed before. I know things happen, administrations change, COVID.
Well, and COVID and the whole thing kind of went sideways.
Don't we need this redistricting to qualify for the CLG?
I don't believe we do because we
Okay,
have an
good.
existing district.
Perfect.
But if we're gonna make ourselves eligible for the grants, I'd like to see more of the town qualify
Sure.
or be available for those.
What, how much time would be involved if we did it on our bus tour? It seems like a lot of time.
No, we just scheduled it and we all met here and we used
It was
one
a
of the
half a
smart
day.
buses.
I think it
and
was like a Saturday, wasn't it?
Oh,
Yeah, it was a half a
just
day.
a one-day deal, okay.
It was a
Yeah.
Saturday morning.
There's just
And-
no fighting allowed on that bus.
Well, yes, that was the infamous John Love issue.
That was an amazing day for me.
Huh?
That was an amazing
I'm
day.
sorry that I had to bring that up.
Mr. McGee had to remove him from the bus. That didn't go well. Were you the bus driver?
No, I
Oh.
wish I was.
Huh?
I wish I was.
It was a lady at the
But
time because at one point she was afraid to move the
maybe
bus.
Kathy Rhodes.
Since you were grandfather
Um,
before, we will know.
I don't know, but it was an unfortunate situation.
That's gonna be at the circuit court.
So, does anybody have any more questions? I think we've had enough discussion to bring it forward. And then between now and next month, Steve, we'll look at getting some of that stuff.
We'll get in the big
And I'll
vans.
reach out to SHPA to get us a set of the guidelines so we know where we have to go.
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
I'm gonna reach out to the SHPA office in
Okay.
Michigan. I believe Ellen Thackeray, and I remember the other lady, she came and talked to us.
Was it
one-
Margaret something?
She was tiny little woman, dark haired.
I thought it was Margaret, but it's been, like I said, years.
She's in my phone somewhere, but in order to find her, I'd have to have a name. Ellen Thackeray and Margaret Tees?
Can't remember.
Anyway,
Ellen will hopefully remember.
Ellen Thackeray, yeah, anyway. So, but that kind of gives it to you and we can bring it forward then.
Point of order, do we need a motion to,
No, I don't think so at this point. It's under new business today. It'll go under old business and then we'll bring it back next month.
okay.
No action necessary at this point. That being said, we'll go, well, redistricting maps was kind of the same thing. I don't know why it got put as two, but next month it can be joined together. And then now you have a new ethics ordinance?
Well, the council does. On April 11th of this year, the council updated ordinance 472 and really just cleaned it up a little bit. But basically, and I know it's all in your packet, I think it's 4 or 5 pages of, just to do the right things and conduct of, public meetings and.
I don't believe we have it in our packet. I think it was in the packet from last month.
Yeah, it was last month's packet.
It was in
Yeah,
last
okay.
month's packet.
Not
Last
this
month, I worked with Jeremy and I went ahead and
It's your-
scheduled.
It's here.
It's your, to it,
Oh, is it? Okay.
you're right, it was last month too, but it's here again.
It just got pushed, yeah.
Yeah.
But really, there's
Well,
not
it's
that
in
many
your
changes.
packet, it's not in mine.
But you say council, and I know it is council chief, but it does apply to appointees.
Oh, it is
right?
over here.
All of us,
Yeah.
yep. All commissions, council, all
Jim.
the full and
No,
part-time.
it is here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't designed for this commission or any, it was just, it's a blanket.
So it's on the agenda just to make us aware of it, introduce it to us? Okay. So another item that has no action required.
None at all.
Okay,
Nope, just read for your future knowledge.
okay. So then, let me send 2 that way, send 3 this way. I have one more here that belongs to Mr. McCanny. I will see that he gets that.
Sir?
And I just happen to think of something. Steve, if you would make note, also add under old business HDC guidelines. Remember, we took all that time and put that book together? Mr. McCanny did a lot of that work on that. We need to get
Yeah.
that approved through the state, so I'll add that to my list. These are things that unfortunately got lost during COVID. We thought we had it all done, and then we found out we had to have it approved by the state before we could turn it over to the council to be approved. So we have a step in there we didn't know originally that we had. So this is the draft. The questions that I had were, what can somebody do? Can they build a brand-new modern building with glass and stainless steel and stick it in the middle of the alley? Because several people have been concerned about what's going to come back in that building and what's it going to make the alley look like. So there are guidelines for that. They are here. If we walk through them, there are, after the title page, consideration for infill construction in Holly's Historic District. It talks about why and who oversees this issue in the front page. I don't want to take time to read all of it, but on the second page,
You drop down to number 9, and it gives a pretty good overview.
yeah, but you're 3 pages in. Number 9 where?
First page.
Number, I didn't know what they were. Where are you seeing the number 9?
Second paragraph at the bottom.
Oh, in the middle of the paragraph, I see it.
Okay.
It gives a pretty good overview.
New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials. In other words, in the case of this building, if it has anything to do with the Holly Hotel being connected to it or touching it, obviously it would not be allowed to cause a problem for their historic building. It also may not interrupt with spatial relationships that characterize the property. The new work will be differentiated from the old and yet will be compatible with historic materials, features, size, scale, and portion, and massing project, the integrity of the property and its environment. So as you look through this, you will see where the old building went from property line to property line. The new building is expected to do that as well. The old building was made of brick, and there's a picture of it in the, I think, on the title page, and that will continue to be the types of material. As you get into the material, it talks about the glass windows, the showcase front, and how they went from one side to the other. It talks about punch-out windows for the top. That'll be expected to be a part of that building, so it won't take on a new look and a space-age look and that kind of stuff. It will be expected to be the same height. Now, the new building could realistically be taller, because as you see that in this cover picture, the Holly Hotel was taller than the arcade. And it talks about it in here that the new building could go to current heights within that alley.
40 foot.
I'm sorry?
That's 40 foot.
Yeah. So there are some options that he has here. And if you remember, the arcade had a basement under it. The new building can have a basement. In the case of the arcade, the basement was actually a raised basement because you went up about 5 steps to get into the main floor of the arcade.
Did it twice,
Yeah.
because you came from the very back and you stepped up, then you got up, another 30 feet, and you stepped up again.
Yeah, well, so that's what I'm saying. So in this draft, if you take time to look at this, we don't have to go page by page tonight, because it does take some time to ingest it all. I looked at it this afternoon before I printed it. But it talks about the kind of brick that is acceptable versus the kind that isn't, and that has to do with sizing and finish and so forth. So you don't end up, a lot of these new buildings today are built with those modern, larger brick, or even if you look outside the window, the brick that's over there, that won't be allowed down in here because it has to stay within what's done. It also talks about size proportions, and if on this page here with the yellow squares and triangles, it shows you almost a Frank Lloyd Wright house that wouldn't look right in this setting. So it shows you what can happen and what shouldn't happen. And then the whole height line is considered here. You get to the next page and it shows you brick. Now, it does show you a difference where the new buildings decide to put a balcony, or they might decide to put an outdoor patio kind of thing. Those things are allowed in the new building as long as the materials and the styling is conducive to the rest of the alley. So they do have some opportunities there. What I'd like everybody to do is, like I said, take this home with you, because I know it's probably taken, you know,
Somebody looking at that property, or is it already?
it's already owned.
It's already been
It has
acquired?
Sorry. So the property, just so you know, the back of, Steve McGee might be able to help me with the details. The back of the property was sold to Andy's place. Because if you remember, you had to go in and tuck around it to get into their
Right.
building.
Right.
They bought enough so that the back of their building has a clear space, which will allow them to do their ADA compliance in the back.
So was that a split?
Yes. And then the rest of the property was sold to a private owner on the other end of it. And that private owner has been in contact with Ron Campbell, and Ron Campbell's willing to help work with them. So that makes our job easier, because you know, if it comes with Ron's approval,
It's gonna
we're
be
pretty
done.
good. Yeah. So, I had seen one preliminary drawing, that the current owner was considering, and that's what made me reach out to Ron. I had definite concern, because that drawing looked more like a modern medical building, if you will, and I was very concerned with how that would be received in the community, and the look that it would give to Battle Alley. So that's why I reached out to Ron, and I said, we need to be up to speed on what we're looking at and understand it. I think as you read through this, what I'd like you to do is, when you read through this, if you have something that you're not clear about, raise that issue, send it to me in email. He said in his email, typos have not been corrected, so if you see any of those, please circle them, let them know. This is a draft, so that when the final product comes out, it can be closer to, I always want to say perfect, and we always know that's not a reality,
Can't be done.
but we want to at least strive to get that direction. But definitely, if you see something that's not clear, raise that issue so we can look at it again, and Ron perhaps can go back and make it more clear. Because we are going to use this when it comes time to see those plans and make those decisions. So it's important that we understand this going forward.
Cool.
When Ron told me he wasn't going to be able to make the meeting and he had sent this, I thought, I better run some copies and get them down to everybody. So that's what that is. Are there any other questions? Steve, did you have any questions or
No,
thoughts?
you answered, you did good.
Okay, did you have a chance to peruse it when you were putting them together?
Just when you were talking.
Just sketching it, yeah. So I've actually had the opportunity this afternoon, I read it line for line through most of it, and it's typical Ron Campbell, it's pretty thorough.
So a new building, according to the way that these older buildings were built, will actually be occupying space with the Holly Hotel, as far as their exterior wall will meet Holly Hotel's exterior
Yes,
firewall.
Yep.
Now, are they required to have, you required to have firewall? Electrical?
Well, both buildings will be suppressed. So whenever there's more than 51% damage, and that's why Andy's now has to have ADA, the ramps and all that sort of thing. So her building will be suppressed, the Holly Hotel will be suppressed and have an elevator, and this new building will be suppressed.
Oh,
So
cool.
firewalls won't be as
Not
important.
even an issue.
Yeah, but we'll still have 2 hour separation.
no, and to let you know, the Holly Hotel received, so I get the name of this grant right, they did receive a grant. Give me a second here while I have way too many people texting me.
I had friends from out of state contact me, said they were gonna be in town in July. Can you make reservations for us at the Holly Hotel? No, not currently.
You can make them, but they won't be.
Yeah, no.
Well, the biggest problem is people don't understand it's not a hotel.
No, they knew,
Oh,
they used to live here.
I've had people say, do you know how many rooms they have or what?
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, no.
No, wasn't there actually a hotel down by the Opera House though?
I think the Holly Hotel was a hotel at one time.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
at one
beginning.
time.
Yeah, back in the day.
And they have considered making the third floor, now that there'll be an elevator, into 4 units, but the cost was prohibitive, so doesn't sound like that will happen.
Okay, so those of you that remember Janet Krieger, she was the lady that ran the convention when it was here last year. She sent me a text. She said, congratulations on the Holly Hotel being awarded a National Trust Backing Historic Small Restaurants Grant.
Hmm.
It's wonderful news. And I immediately texted back to her and said, what about Andy's place? So we're looking into that. Because in my thought process, if one qualifies, the other should be right there. And they can both use help because of all the stuff they have to do going forward. So, but that's good news for the hotel going forward. And I think we're also working with MEDC to get them some help too.
Several, yeah, there are
Yep.
3 at least,
I'm sorry?
3 agencies at least.
Yeah. So we are working behind the scenes to try to get them help to get these projects pushed across the finish line. Do you want people to send the questions for the draft to me or to you?
If you wouldn't mind sending them to me as well,
Or send them to both of us then?
that'd be great.
Yeah, so and then we can get them to Ron Campbell and take a look at them. Does anybody have any other questions?
Nope.
On it? Okay, then that brings us down to commission and staff comments. I will start with Ms. Cuxey.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, Mr. Turpinning.
Nothing?
I will go to Mr. DeSessa.
Well, first of all, George, I'd like to officially return your file to you that I've been holding for a little while.
Oh, actually, I believe this goes right on down to
Okay,
Kari.
keeps going.
Oh.
This is the file we used when we applied for your,
Oh, gotcha.
And
Thank
then,
you.
secondly, George hasn't mentioned this yet, but we went to the May 11th and 12th Mackinac Island Preservation Convention. It was wonderful, great time. They brought a few materials, just want to glance over them real quick. You can, I mean, there's, I don't know if it's gonna be of any interest or not, but pass that down if you want. But it was at the Mission Point Resort there in Mackinac Island. As George points out, you know, as great as the island is, we're in these courses all day, so with no windows. So it was still nice to go to the island, it was fun, but really it was for the courses that the workshops that we attended, those were very interesting. Seeing what other communities in the state are doing, using grants, historic, credits, tax credits and grants and so forth to do. And so that was all very interesting to me. And,
a lot of and I didn't say anything because I was leaving it for you.
okay.
So a lot of networking goes on at these events. And what he's alluding to is I said, they always do this, and Steve, you'll know that this is true even on a bigger scale because you go to them out of state. They always plan these conventions at great cities, like, so that it makes you want to go there. But the problem is you get there, and from 8 in the morning till 4:30, you're in rooms that don't even have windows while you're in these breakout sessions. Then you get a little break for a half an hour, and then they have dinner in another big room where there's no windows. And yes, we were at Mackinac Island, but I never got to go out and walk down the street. Now, in this particular case, my wife went with me because I've already got a room, and she got to go spend time in the island. Saturday, when the thing was all done and it's time to go home, then she did what was called, come here, I want you to see this guided tour. And we spent a couple of hours then and did it. But we were there for 3 days, and all you and I saw was the inside of the resort and rooms.
But if I recall, you made a couple real connections that clicked in your brain with folks that could.
Well, and that was the thing. You know, they had a session on funding. So we got to meet with the people that are in charge of some of these different grant funding the humanities, the arts, and how their money can, if you get creative, how you can get some of that money for some of what you're doing. And that works maybe not directly for the HDC, but it works for some other areas. They get down to the nitty gritty and they say, I took a grant writing class one time and I got really frustrated. The first half hour of the class was, so you'll see where it says to put your first name. We want your first name there. Now don't put your last name because there's a separate box for the last name and we don't want the last name for the first name. And they went on, and you could see the room getting restless and to the point where somebody went, we know all that part. We need to know the crux of getting into this. Unfortunately, that lady was literally there to show you how to fill out the form. And it was almost useless for that class. This class was different. They were saying, let's say you wanted to do this. Here's how you get creative and put that down there. Let's say you're looking at doing this. How does it tie to this? Well, if you bring this in, that's the kind of stuff that you found yourself scribbling notes and writing down. And the networking. You got to talk to other groups that have been successful in getting those grants. And in some cases, they'll tell you, well, we had to apply for it 3 years in a row until we got it right. So there's some inroads there. And you bring back your cards and your literature like you did.
And I think it's worth mentioning just real quick, the last thing I have to say about it is, along those same lines that George mentioned, is one of the courses, Calumet, Copper Harbor, but somewhere up north, this community has this great concept where, based on QR codes, they've been around a while, you put them on a business card or a flyer, so someone zaps it on their phone, calls up a website for their project, which involves the public. Once this comes up, it's really a map of the historic district in their town, and it allows volunteers to go punch in information about the buildings there. So the public's participating in the project. It saves money and allows them to get this done without hiring, some big consulting firm for $5 million. But it just seemed like it was very innovative. Apparently it's working. But the main reason I mentioned that, George, I could be wrong. I believe the guy, one of those participants, was willing to come down here to our meetings for like a training session at some point.
Yes.
So we may want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and what he's talking about is, somebody can walk by my house and they have a story about my house, and they could go in and add that story. So you're collecting data and information on your history without having to have meetings, without having to have committees. It can be just random. We met another guy. I met him the night of the presentations. And if you've been to a town where they've had like a storyboard that tells you about that building and so forth, this is the guy that writes them. And we've got his information. We can bring him to town, and he makes his living this way, in all fairness. But he creates those wonderful storyboards that get printed, and you might have one of those storyboards in front of the venue that would tell the school, might have a couple of pictures, but it's really, if you go to Clarkston, if anybody's been to Clarkston recently, they're all over town. And they're kind of a walking tour. They're out in front and they tell you the story about the different things in Clarkston. He was involved in making those out. So there were there's always good connections, there's good networking there. You get to run into people that are working on projects.
I'm assuming those are paid for with a grant or something.
Yep. And they are.
Perfect.
Because all of a sudden, how do I get that paid for? Well, this guy over here has a grant for educational purposes. That's how you tell you. Because if you just looked at the raw number or the name, you'd think, well, how's that going to help the historic district? Well, these guys are giving the money, or they're telling you how to be creative and get some of this money for your projects. And once we get a defined area, you can get grants for signage, for these walking signs, these walking tours like he was talking about. What was the other one? They throw so much at you in 2 days. What was the other one where they were having us go outside and find the...
That was the same
That
one.
was the same one?
Same one, using GPS or whatever.
Yeah, GPS where you could find
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And they create like a self-guided walking tour in the town with just the initial...
Right. And one thing I didn't notice, and this goes to what you're saying about people networking and connecting, there's a lot of these positions out there, people in these careers that in the historic area, preservation area, I just never thought about. So we met historic architects and even historic bankers who deal with loans and so forth. Just a lot of positions out there that are in this area I never even knew.
That one couple from Ann Arbor,
Yeah.
they've been architectural, they're the people, have you ever, I don't know how many of you were on the board, Ron Campbell did a presentation one time where he showed some buildings. Steve, you might remember this. You looked at the front of the building and you said, well, that can definitely be saved. Then he gave you a side angle. The whole back of the building had burned and was gone. Well, it was that presentation that when I heard the engineers had said the second level had to come off of Andy's, I immediately got on the phone and called Ron and said, I need your help quick to intercede. Because in that picture, that was a building in Ann Arbor. You would have thought the whole thing was gone. And they showed you how they come in and built the building within the building and just took the facade and attached it to the new building. And in essence, saved the historical makeup of that building for that street light in Ann Arbor. In that presentation, he also showed us a couple of buildings like yours, where this is the historic building, this is what we want to preserve. The people wanted to put an add-on, and while many people think you have to build it and make it look exactly like what the existing building is, they actually want you to build it different, so that when you look at the building, you can say, this is the historic building, this is the new stuff. So it was quite educational in that respect. And we got to meet with a lot of people of those and see some of the projects that they had done over the course of a year. And some of the buildings that received those awards that had been rehabbed. What was the one? It was huge. 3 stories long. It had been a manufacturing building. Remember the red brick? And they showed the long, and it had been sitting there empty, and it had been almost hollow. And they went through this building and turned it into apartments, retail on the bottom, mixed use kind of thing. And in that particular project, it was in a part of the town that was dead. And the ripple effect, the people that jumped on board and bought the smaller buildings and rehabbed those, made this whole economic center come alive. So there really is, I think part of the reason I'm doing this, or part of the reason Bill is, next year, try to find out the dates for the conference and try to cut out a period so you can go.
Do
Because
they have the dates on the brochure for next year? They usually
This
do
is,
that.
yeah, this isn't the overall brochure, it's like
Okay.
for one project.
Yeah,
but yeah, there might be.
I'm
see
sure
when
we
get
can
those
find
dates.
it.
I'm sure they have.
We'll have the information at the next meeting.
Okay.
I gotta be honest with you, usually I walk away knowing where it's gonna be next year. I don't know that I heard him say it.
You know, I think they did, George, I forget where, but maybe not. I thought they did say at some point.
We'll look for that and try to have that information for you next
But
month.
just to give that last, we did go back and remind people that, hey, we're from Holly, we had it last year, and people were very complimentary, so that goes
Nice.
to your, yes.
Yeah, I had a couple people come up that I didn't know them, and they said, hey, you guys did a great job last year. So that was nice to hear, too.
I love the walking tour and with the billboards. We need that.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Okay. Mr. Murphy,
I'm good.
all right? Then I will move to, I'm sorry, I drew a blank. Our commissioner, our
I'm
councilman.
good, I have nothing.
Councilman, I'm looking at the word commission and I couldn't come up with councilman. I apologize.
It's all good.
Councilman Perkins, you're a pass. I will then go to our secretary, see if you have any requests of us
No.
to make nicer
Okay.
motions or not to make any at all. Makes your job easier.
Right.
No.
All good.
No motion, or no action taken. That's
No.
all you have to do tonight for some of that stuff.
Right?
There you go. And Mr. McGee.
Last thing is probably just a little update on Andy's. It's about twice what they thought it was gonna be to rehab. And literally, the only thing that will be saved is the exterior of the building. So, which is all the floor joists, all the ceiling joists, all of it has to be replaced. So the plan is, once they get this big amount of money, to support it, and they'll start in the back and work their way forward. So they're gonna try to get the top on it to dry it up, to keep it dry, and then start in the back between the first and the second floor, those floor joists, replace those, and then they'll go to the floor joists as you enter. And so,
So
it's a big project, but to maintain the facade, it'd be, I would never say this out loud or on TV camera, but it would be a lot cheaper just to tear it down and start fresh. But that's not what we want here.
Good.
And so, and they don't either. And so that's why they're going through all the grant process and trying to find money wherever they can.
right,
And they have someone that's willing to fund it too, but they'll have to pay that back, so they'd really rather have a lot of grants.
say that again, they wanted what?
They have, you know, somebody that'll finance the project, but it would take years and years and a huge expense to repay. So hopefully these grants will come through.
Are they at least gonna be able to get the roof on it before winter?
That's the plan.
Okay, if there's anything we can do to help, please let us know.
Oh, I promise I
If,
will.
if there's a grant out there, and we're waiting for an answer, let me know, because I'm good at rattling
Well,
phones.
Ron's involved up
Yeah.
to his neck, so.
Okay, yeah, because we've got friends that'll help.
Their food truck's fantastic.
Yep, that's been well received, and they've sold out every time they've been somewhere. Well, then there's nothing else before the board. I will close the meeting at 6:52.
What do you think about that, Tom?